Hi all, my name is Lee and welcome to the channel. So first off, I've actually reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I cannot believe it. I'm really pleased that people are enjoying my content. If you keep watching it, I'll keep making it because I really do enjoy the process of learning. So for today's video, I suppose it's a bit of a special. I've actually built another steam engine. Now I'm not going to take you through all of the building, but what I am going to do today is deconstruct it, clean it all up, and as I put it back together, I'll explain how I built this. It's sort of, I mean, I can't call it my own design, but I've not copied any specific design. I've just doubled up what's commonly known as the Wobbler engine, or the oscillating engine. So I've just put two together to make this twin-engined version, which I suppose I would call the twin offset oscillator or the twin offset wobbler maybe. So let's take a closer look at this. We'll deconstruct it, clean all the parts up, put it back together, and I'll explain to you what I did. So here it is all broken down. My main task is just to clean and polish it all up. I might put some cold blue on this piece and just make it as best looking as I can. I've just used pieces of available materials that I had laying around my shop. So of course we've got the main cylinder bodies, the piston, the crank and the crank pins, which are also the flywheels. And I have actually put a bearing in the middle of the body for it to all sit on and keep it straight. So what I'll do is I'll start cleaning and polishing all of this up, but I'll explain each component, what I did and why I did it that way as I go along. So I think to start with, the main body is the main one I want to fix. So I need to take this black off of it. I'm going to actually mill this down so it's nice and smooth and flat, and then I'm going to cold blue it. So a quick explanation of this part. Obviously this has the exhaust and the inlet on there. So the exhaust just goes all the way through the body, these two little holes here. And the inlet only goes halfway through and it goes in at the top. So both cylinders have top entry to get the pressure in there. But then on the exhaust cycle, it just pushes it all the way through the body. So that's the way I've done it on here. The reason I've done that is I've actually got a metal plate, which we'll cover a bit later, that I've milled out a groove into it, and I just clamp that on top with a single hole, so I can blow air, compressed air, into a single hole, and it will go into both of the cylinders. Now, one thing I needed to do is I only had a piece of plate steel 5mm thick, and that wasn't thick enough. So what I've done is I've just actually cut two out and I've glued them together. And this bolt is just an extra security to make sure they stay together, because obviously I've drilled and tapped into the ends, and that would have a tendency to split the glue apart if it did come apart. So this is the reason I've got this bolt in, is just to clamp it all together, and I'll leave that in now because it's holding it nice and square. Also, I've put a bearing in there as well. So just a standard cheap bearing, but that holds it really tight. It's actually an 8mm crankshaft, and I've got a piece of stainless steel as the crank, which fits in there perfectly. So that works really, really well, and it's really strong and stable. So what I want to do with this piece is I want to remove this original black coating to protect the plate wherever it came from. So I'm just going to take some passes with the mill, avoiding this bolt, just to clean and tidy it up and make it nice and smooth. I might give it one last rub on a piece of very fine sandpaper just to finish it. I also want to go across all of the edges with a mill just to make sure everything is nice and smooth and clean, ready for the cold bluing. So first thing I need to do then, let's jump on the mill and get this piece sorted out. So you can see the mill lines, but you can't feel them. That is smooth as anything. Feels really, really good. I'll flip it over and do the other side now. So as you can see, I've changed my mind. I have removed the bolt. I'm just going to risk it. Hopefully the glue will hold, and I'm going to use my big face mill to do this in one pass instead. So let's do that now. Now that is much better. So as you can see, I did end up removing the bearing and also the nut at the top to do this job properly. I thought I might as well do it properly. There's a few machine lines in it, but it feels smooth. All I'll do is I'll just rub this on a piece of sandpaper before I put it all together, just to make sure those two mating surfaces between the cylinder and the body are nice and smooth. I mean, that feels really good anyway. If you're wondering about these other holes, they're obviously, when I was testing, I put the V too wide and the end of the body was actually hanging off the edge. So instead of waste this piece of material, I just reversed it. So that's why you've got these extra holes. They're redundant now. They're not being used. That was just a previous attempt when I was testing it out. So I'm happy with this piece. It's all pretty good. The next pieces I'll do is I'll put the flywheels stroke crank into the lathe, and then I'll sand these down just to make them look a bit more respectable. Now just to show you a little bit closer on here, when I cut these out, as you can see, I left a little offset of 2 millimeters. That's so when you put it against the bearing, it's actually free running against the inner race of the bearing. So that's why I did that. That means that touches that and it doesn't touch the body or anything else. So I think that works really well. Also, you may notice I put, for the crank pin, I put 4 threaded holes in there. These are M3 threads. Each one of these holes is 0.5 millimeter further out. So that gives a total 1 millimeter more stroke. I wanted to do a few of them just so I can test the stroke and get it to the piston to the top of the cylinder. As it turns out, it is the furthest one I need to use, so I may even put another one in and test an even longer stroke. But for now, let's get these in the lathe and get them polished up. Nothing special required here, just a light sanding of the faces. I don't want to polish this too much. I quite like the matte look for the flywheels. I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so these look pretty good. I'm happy with that rough machine finish, the dull looking steel. I think that suits the flywheels perfectly. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going to go any further. So the next components then will be the 2 cylinders and also the top piece. This top piece, just as an explanation, as you can see, I just channeled a gap out of it. I put a hole on the other side, and then this just bolts to the top of this, so the one air hole can put pressurized air into both cylinders. So it's as simple as that. It's just cutting a channel that fits across here. I will actually put a gasket on there, and when I say gasket, I just mean a piece of paper that I've cut out to size, and then I screw that on to hold it tight. So we might as well stick with this piece. It just needs a hand polish. So I'll just rub it on some very fine sandpaper. I'll also do the same with the cylinders. I'll actually finely sand the mating surface, but the other surfaces I'm just going to use my sander to do because these are not important. So let's begin with just machine sanding the other surfaces on the cylinders. So these look pretty good after a quick machine polish with sanding paper. I like the look of these as well. So that's good enough for me. The next job now is to actually hand sand these mating surfaces, because obviously these surfaces rub together. And also I just want to hand sand the bottom of this with a really fine sandpaper, even though I'm going to use a gasket with it, but I just want to get that polished up because that needs to be airtight as well. So let's just get a piece of sandpaper on a flat surface and give them a rub down, probably like 2000 grit or something like that. So all the pieces are looking pretty good and polished now. So this piece and this piece, I'm actually going to cold blue, but all of the pieces I'm just going to wash off in some acetone just to make sure they're clean. So let's get on and do that. We'll put everything in a bath of acetone, but these two pieces I'll dry off and then cold blue. So I've put these parts into some cold blue and it seems to be working okay. I've already put the screw back through to hold it together, so that shouldn't change colour. That's stainless steel, but we'll see what happens. This cold blue recommends full immersion, so that's what I've done. Then I just transfer it to a bowl of water to neutralise it. Now I'm just going to put a fine misting of oil on there. I'm just going to use WD-40 for now. So that's all the parts cleaned and polished. Now all we need to do is put it all back together, but just before I do that, I'm just going to spray all of this just with a light coating of WD-40. Right, so let's begin putting it all back together. I'll start with a bearing in the centre and put the flywheels on. And then let's put the flywheels on. I forgot to mention, I did put a grub screw all the way through these flywheels so I can tighten them down to the crankshaft. I may not need this spacer washer anymore because I've cut down the body size, so I think this may be able to press together and not rub. I'll do some fine adjustments to this second flywheel once I've put the cylinders on and I can see the opposite stroke of each one to get the top dead centre. So the next thing to do is to put the cylinder bodies on. Actually, before I do that, let's just put these crank pins in. So these are an M3 thread. I've already worked out it's the outermost hole I created is the best one. So I'm going to try this piece without a gasket first. And if it's a good seal, then I won't bother. But if it isn't, I'll cut a piece of paper to put around it. Okay, it seems to spin. I have pressure. I might have to adjust the timing very slightly, but I think if I blow air into this now, hopefully it will run. So let's give it a go. Well, that works straight away. I must have the timing almost perfectly. So I'm really happy with that. So let me just polish it up. I'll put it on a base and then we'll give it a final test. So as you can see, I have decided to use a gasket. So I just cut a piece of paper out to size, cut a small slot in the middle and some holes for the screws to go in. So that should be good enough. I've also put a light layer of oil across it to seal it. So now I just need to line up this, screw it down, and hopefully that should be it. Okay, so I think that might make a better seal. I'm happy with that. That's clamped down nicely. Hopefully that's pretty much airtight. Okay, so the next thing is I'm just going to tidy up a base. So just to finish, I thought I'd reuse the same block, just sanded it down a bit, and I'll put some oil on it to protect it. So let's do that now. So that's my block oiled. The final thing to do is I'm just going to glue this into the base. I'm just going to use some super glue to do this. So for the final test, let's get it to run. So thanks for watching and thank you for 1,000 subscribers. I'd never thought I'd get to 1,000 people who'd watch me in my garage. So I really appreciate it. If you like this content or you know other people who would, please share my channel to other people. If people keep watching, I'm going to keep making them because I really enjoy this process. So this is my little steam engine. I guess I'm going to call it the twin offset wobbler. But if you actually know the real name of this engine, if it has a name, please let me know in the comments. Leave a like and hopefully I'll see you soon on the next project. Cheers.